I want to start with Cade Cunningham because I think Cade Cunningham is the thing that people are most excited about. Cade Cunningham went and played for the USA Select team, and in the first set of scrimmages, dominated,
Yep.
unequivocally dominated in the ways that you expect Cade Cunningham to dominate. If you go and you watch the tape, it's like, okay, he's just getting to his spots methodically because he is smarter and bigger and stronger than everybody that you will see at the guard position, save for like Luka, essentially.
Yep.
It was the exact kind of thing that I think Pistons fans were really excited about going into last season.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, Cade gets hurt. So I want to start here.
Yeah.
Before Cade got hurt, he started poorly over the course of like the first 5 games.
Mm-hmm.
And I think not enough people recognize just how good he was over like, the back,
like the last 7
of his, of his, unfortunately shortened season.
Yep.
Explain to me what you saw from Cade Cunningham last season that was so exciting, because when I watched him, I was like, oh no, this is real. Like, this is immediately real. And I think people have just completely forgotten about those last like 7 or so games where he was just like a total stud.
Yeah, and I understand it, right? And I try to tell Pistons fans this all the time, is like, we all watch Cade. We all know what he's capable of. Obviously, nationally, the Pistons don't get the attention. Out of sight, out of mind for Cade. People will just kind of, I don't want to say dismiss, but it's like, like I said, out of sight, out of mind. And they maybe knock him down on a few things. Oh, he's injury prone. I don't think that's the case, right? That he hasn't been there to show on a national stage. To get to your question, the biggest difference that I remember is the first 5 games he was trying to get to the rim, and he was challenging the Mitchell Robinsons of the world. He was challenging, I'm trying to think who they played early in the year. I don't know, the Porzingis is the big 7-foot rim protectors, and he was really struggling. He would go into a crowd, he would try to finish over him, and it was not working. Then you saw, like, at game 6, he started settling. I don't want to say settle. He started to alter his approach and his attack, and he went to the mid-range. He didn't always go all the way to the hole. And if you go and look at the numbers, during that last 7 games he played, again, small sample size, but I remember I wrote a story. I think he led the league. If he wasn't number 1, he was like number 2 or 3 in mid-range jumper efficiency. And that was the biggest thing. If you go back and watch that tape, you watch the first 5 games, you're like, why is Cade challenging this guy at the rim? Why is he challenging this guy at the rim? And then it clicked for him. And like, I think that's one of my favorite things about Cade as a player is the self-awareness. He's not going to jump over a lot of guys. He's not going to beat a lot of big men around the rim. Mm-hmm. So what he does is he gets to his spots in the mid-range where his jump shot is translated immensely from college. And he was able to look in the mirror and realize, like, I'm not finishing well at the rim. I'm a great mid-range shooter. You can shoot the mid-range if you shoot the percentage that I shoot. And he knocked him down. And that was the biggest change for me. Just the change in shot selection, the change in finding his spots on the floor and using his size. And at that time, he didn't even have the frame that he has now, but just using his size to shoot over guys, it was night and day, just the approach, and it really worked for him.
Well, I think the thing that I want to, note here is obviously the addition of Monty Williams, right?
Yeah.
Going to get Monty, I think not enough people are making, I think people aren't making enough of the idea of how stylistically similar at times Cade Cunningham and Devin Booker can actually look.
Yep.
Devin has this reputation as being, one of the best shooters in the NBA. He's this, he's that. And last season really was the first one where it was like 3 levels. He was showcasing that consistently all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You look back through like his first few years, Devin Booker was a good shooter. Like, there's a reason that for his career, he is a 35% 3-point shooter. Yep. You look at his 4th season in the league, he shot 32% from 3. 5th season, 35%. 6th season, 34%. Over the last 2 years, he's been at like 37% from 3, taking a ton of them and taking a lot of tough ones, obviously. But I think that the key that people just don't recognize is that Devin is a guy that really likes to operate in that mid-range area, really likes to operate in similar ways to how Cade likes to operate. And I think that what we're going to see is a lot of very similar sets to what the Suns ran for Devin to get him free. And I think it's really going to loosen up for Cade and really make things a lot easier for him to operate at a high level. You know, obviously they're going to have the Jalen Duren idea, and we'll talk about him momentarily, just in terms of being that DeAndre Ayton style rim runner. And frankly, like, he's a more willing, consistent rim runner as opposed to short roller than what DeAndre is, which I think is a little bit more valuable for this Pistons construction. They have Bojan Bogdanovic, who's going to play in that, like, you know, Cam Johnson / Mikal Bridges role as a shooter, floor spacer, who can also like create in secondary ball screen opportunities. The big thing is just figuring out what they're going to do at guard, right? With Jaden Ivey and with Asar Thompson and everything like that. They're going to have to figure out that second guard position, but there are a lot of similarities, I think, stylistically in terms of the build of this Pistons team, centralized around Cade in a similar way to how the Phoenix Suns were built, centralized around Devin Booker, with all of the pieces around him working to make Devin the best player that he could be. I think that all of the Pistons pieces around Cade work together in synergy with Monty to make Cade the best player that he can be.
Couldn't agree more. I asked Monty at his introductory press conference, what did he see in terms of similarities between the two teams? And when I say that, I meant like the Suns when he took over. Aside from, obviously, people can make the correlation. Detroit fans are hoping this is the case. Monty took over. They went from 19 to 35 wins, which is a massive leap. So Pistons fans are obviously hoping the similar leap comes. And if you look at the roster of Detroit, assuming everybody's healthy, it's not a 17-win team. They're not. I'm not saying they were a 30-win team last year if they got relatively good health, but they're not a 17-win team, right? So the jump doesn't look as the jump. If they make the jump, it's going to look a lot more drastic than it probably actually is. But even stylistically, like you said, that to me was the correlation immediately, because aside from just Devin, CP3 shooting a lot of middies. That's what we know him for. KD shooting a lot of middies. They shot a lot of mid-range jumpers as a team. And obviously people talk about the analytics. Well, you talk to anybody in the NBA, they don't frown against the mid-range when you can hit it. And they have three of the best mid-range shooters of the last 10 years, 20, 15 years on their roster. And Cade, small sample size, but based on what he showed in flashes last year and even as a rookie, like he's going to be in that territory of an elite mid-range shooter. And I think, like you said, there are going to be sets run to set him up. I think that's going to help Jaden too, because he'll be able to, they'll find ways to get the ball in his hand. And obviously instead of like grabbing and going, like there's going to be situations where he's going to set up half court offense to get Cade those opportunities too. So I love that point that you make. It was something that I initially like thought of as soon as the Monty hiring happened, because they were a high volume mid-range team, and I believe a high efficient mid-range team. And Detroit, especially Cade, that's going to be something that I think they really try to utilize, because he's so comfortable with it, and it's going to open up so much more. And I think, like you said, they're going to have to figure out some stuff. Do they start Isaiah Stewart at the 4, Bojan, Jaden? Do they go Bojan at the 4 and give up some maybe rebounding and defense and go Asar? I think they end up starting with Stu, because I think they do believe in the shot. So offensively, maybe put him in the corner. I believe in the shot. We've talked about it. You believe in the shot. You wrote it in your draft.
To an extent.
I'm not saying he's like a 38% three-point shooter, but I think there's a world he gets to 34, 35.
Honestly, like he might be a 38% three-point shooter.
Yeah.
On 4 shots a game or something. It's just whether or not he gets guarded out there.
Exactly.
Right. Like that's the big question. Like our team's always just going to collapse on Cade at the expense of leaving Isaiah open, or can he get to a level where he's like comfortable taking them at volume to where teams are like, oh shit, like we actually have to get out on him.
Yep.
That's where the difference is going to be. I don't know if I see that necessarily, but I think he'll make them when he's open.
Agreed.
Like I think, like I feel pretty good about that. I agree with you. I think they probably do start with Isaiah at the end of the day, and I think that's probably a pretty smart move. if only because a big piece of being able to operate in the mid range, as the Phoenix Suns under, Monty Williams and Devin Booker showed, you do need great shooters and you need spacing around those guys so that when players pull up from the mid range, they're not getting like double contested. They're not getting like, the primary contest from the front. And then also, the defender is snaking around the screen defensively, trying to get around, goes over the top and contests rear view window while also getting that front contest. Right. Yep. So I think that the spacing is the big thing for them. And I've talked at length about how I'm like pretty worried about this overall roster construction from a spacing perspective. Like I'm worried about Jalen not being able to shoot. I'm worried about Jaden not being able to shoot. And I'm worried about Asar not being able to shoot. And those being 3 of the 4 guys that realistically are your most important pieces to build around.
Yep.
They really, 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 really need Jaden Ivey to be able to shoot.
Yes, 100%. And I think I think Cade will help him get easier shots.
Yes.
Excuse me. And he did shoot 37% from, I think, February to the end of the season. So just the development there is a good sign, but I agree it needs to be consistent. It needs to not be as forced. And I think it won't be as forced once Cade comes back and he's off ball a little bit more. But I agree with you. Those things do need to happen for it to really click.
Yeah, and the other piece of it, obviously, they draft Marcus Sasser. Marcus Sasser is an awesome floor spacer. I'm kind of wondering, like, I know they went out and got Monte Morris. Monte Morris, awesome floor spacer, not a volume 3-point shooter, but somebody that is very comfortable shooting.
Yep.
I kind of think that both of those guys end up playing, like, maybe not both of them, at least one of them ends up playing a bigger role than what people think. This year, it'll probably be Monty, and then next year, it'll probably move into being Marcus at the end of the day. But yeah, I'm truly fascinated by how this goes and where it goes, because it's a truly interesting roster. Like, I think there's a world where they could start Monte Morris and go like Monte, Cade, like Boyan, Stewart, and Duran, and then you bring Jaden and Asar and Marcus off the bench. And then that's like kind of your 2 through, or your 1 through 3. And then you hope Marcus can shoot. Well, they still have Burks too. So like, what do you do with Burks? You have to have Burks play obviously as well. So maybe Marcus is out of the rotation, but like, I think that there are a lot of different ways they can make it work. The thing that I'm most interested in though, is how they make it work around Cade. And that's why I wonder if Monte is the one that makes a little bit more sense, because of Monte's ability to shoot from distance with Boyan, with whatever you can get maybe from Isaiah. It's interesting. I think they have a lot of options, I guess, in the backcourt that could work.
I do too. And I'm very curious to see how they make room for it, right? Because I'm with you. I'm a big Marcus Sasser fan, have been, but you kind of look and it's Cade, Jaden playing, Monty, Burks, assuming Burks is still on the team. I've gotten every indication he will be playing. So that's 4 guys. Do they run 3 guards in the second unit? But then it's like, okay, if Asar's not starting, he can't play the 4. They really like Isaiah Livers, who could play the 4. And then obviously one of Bagley or Wiseman will play the backup 5. So I know some fans here have talked about like they're worried about the overlap. Well, I'm like, I think it's a good thing to have if Joe Harris is on ice until like December, right? Like we haven't even mentioned Joe Harris or Marcus Sasser is on ice, or even if you need a Killian Hayes in a pinch, right? Like it's not bad to have that in a pinch. So I like the options. I think figuring out the lineups is good. I think they have spacing. It's just figuring out the lineups to make it work is going to be fascinating for sure.
Yeah. And look, like it's weird to have a lineup where I feel like all 15 guys like realistically might play.
Yeah.
Like
they're all in the same bunch. Either like the vets are important or the young guys are still like same age, bring different skill sets. Like you can make a case for all of them.
Yeah. Like it's going to bring like real competition to training camp. Like this is them, and the Thunder to me are the teams where like, oh, like you actually really have to pay attention to training camp here. I mean, there are other teams obviously, but these are the 2 where I'm like, oh, this is going to be like a real competition.
Yeah. Like guys could get traded after camp.
I would expect that it happens.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Because look, a piece of this is like, I really like the way that Like I would expect one of Joe Harris or Alec Burks probably to get moved by January or something like that. I would expect, probably Monte Morris is going to get moved. Although like it's hard because Monte is a dude that has been there, probably has wanted to play for the Pistons for a long time.
Yep.
As a guy that grew up in Flint, right?
Shout out to Flint. Yep.
Yeah. So like he's a dude that like probably really wants to be there on some level. I don't know. I'm fascinated by the way the construct works, but it all works around Cade. Making him work is the best piece here. You go back, and by the way, like, and we're going to talk about more than Cade here momentarily, but I do just want to note, you go back to Devin Booker's third year in Phoenix, they won 21 games. The fourth year, they won 19 games. The fifth year, 34 games. That's when it started to turn.
And that was Monty's first year. Yep.
And that's Monty's first year. It might take a year. Like it really might to make this all make sense and for it to work. But I wouldn't be all that discouraged, I think, if it does. Let's finish on Cade now and talk about what happened with Team USA.
Yeah.
It was just everything that you wanted to see as a Pistons fan, I would imagine. Like truly.
Seriously. And I tagged you in a tweet, and it's multi-layered for me, right? Aside from I've been showing people pictures because Cade's he hasn't done many interviews since he's been out, but he's been around, and I've been showing people like photos of how much muscle he's put on. So I think for people to see how that looks, something they've been wondering, check, right? It looked good. Secondly, I think he just got cleared like a month and a half ago, and he looks great shape, right? So that's encouraging. Yeah. Then there's the fact that he had an invitation to go to the U.S. team. Yeah. And I think Pistons fans will love this. And it's something that I don't think locally has been talked about enough. Turning it to make sure he is ready for the Pistons. And if you talking to Cade, he is very much like takes being the number one pick seriously and all that comes with that.
Yep.
And that is something he really like. He wants to turn the franchise around. He wants that. So like for Pistons fans, like he has a chance to be like, he could have took the U.S. invite and been told the world I'm back. Like you forgot about me, but like he'd rather stay out of the limelight to make sure he's prepared for the Pistons. And then, and then lastly, and the thing I tagged you in, I try to reiterate it to fans. Obviously it's hard when he's not playing or the three ball hasn't fallen like people thought and the team's losing. But this guy has legitimate star potential. And if we're being honest, of everybody that's on the select team and on the big boy team, and you can agree or disagree with me, we didn't have that dialogue on Twitter. He was the most, going into his respective draft, right? Like, would you say he was the most heralded of everybody that is there currently? Right.
Yes.
And so for him to quote unquote dominate the way he did or control the pace or whatever you want to call it, stand out. That is the amazing sign for his stardom, right? That's exactly like people might be surprised because they haven't paid attention. But if you've watched Cade, you're not surprised. I'm not surprised that he was the second best player in Vegas the last 2 weeks, right? So
yeah, no, I'm with you, honestly. Like he is the guy that was always the one seen as the all-NBA player. Truly. Like he is the guy.
Yep.
In a draft that has Evan Mobley, Franz Wagner, Scotty Barnes, all those guys, I'm still riding with Cade. Like that's the guy for me. Like he's the one he's the dude to me. And look, you could take the Pistons decision to focus on the Pistons season one of two ways. And I would get it if you thought about it this way at first, right? Mm-hmm. Like, look, he's entering an extension eligible season, like off season next season, right?
Yeah.
So his the third year is the most important for guys on rookie scale deals, truly. Yep. And if Cade wants to get a max deal, he's go out and average, 25, 6, and 6. Yep. And I think he can do more than that, frankly, this year. But like, if he goes out and averages 25, 6, and 6, he's getting a max contract from the Detroit Pistons, like unequivocally. Yep. So you could take it that way. And honestly, if you did, I'm sure there was some sort of dialogue there
Yep.
with
No,
him
that's
and
a
his
great point.
representation and everything like that. But you're 100% right. Like, Cade is a very serious individual in terms of like basketball, taking all of this in the way that you want to take it. Like he wants to be great. Like, he doesn't want to just be good. Like, Anthony Edwards, like, coming into the draft was like, yeah, like, I kind of like football. Like, people, remember that story that came out, I think literally on draft day or the day before draft day or wherever, where he was like, yeah, like, I kind of like football more than basketball.
And I love how much his mentality has changed actually since then. Like, I feel like I feel like very few guys love basketball now more than him. But yes, you are correct.
And it speaks to the fact that we're dealing with an imperfect deck of information pre-draft, where we're dealing with teenagers that are not fully formed individuals. Right. Yep. And the intel that you get pre-draft is not going to be the same as the intel that you get when someone is 22 years old. Right.
Yep.
So I say all of this to say, Cade has always been very steady with all of this. It's similar with the Thompsons. Like, Cade is very similarly minded to them in terms of the way that he thinks about the game, thinks about basketball, cares about basketball, wants to be great. So I'm not surprised that any of this is happening. I'm not surprised that he came back from his injury in unbelievable shape. I'm not surprised that he may have like felt a little bit sorry for himself early on, but then just immediately snapped back in and was like, I'm going to be the dude still. I've seen nothing that worries me about Cade yet. He just got hurt, and I think we're going to be fine.
And I think we both believe in the shot. Like, the kid's not going to shoot 31% from three forever.
No, he's going to shoot fine from three. He might operate a little bit more in the mid range, and he might be more of like a 35, 36, 34% from three guy, just because he takes a lot of tough ones, similarly to Luka, similarly to Devin Booker. But he's going to have the kind of gravity where guys guard him at the end of the day, because you have to guard him.